Hey, so this week we took a look at Plato's Republic, a few books out of that, specifically books 1, 6, and 7, as well as Phaedo, which is kind of a separate work. I would say that kind of our main theme over these books was justice. Obviously, Phaedo is a little different. It's mostly it has to do with the soul, but I think that it kind of relates to kind of the later books that we looked at, um, and kind of this idea of what is justice. Plato's Republic uses Socrates as the main character, and he has all these conversations about what justice really is, and kind of uses that Socratic method to break down um, the kind of the nitty gritty about what justice is and how it's different than kind of other crafts. I don't know how much of this I'm going to be able to get through in a short amount of time because there's really a lot to talk about here, but I'll try to move quickly. Socrates kind of touches on justice and that there's always a reason for all things that can guide your choices, so that there's always some way to logically reason your decisions, and that you can kind of guide your your choices based off of that. And like I said, he kind of says justice is not like other things. It's not like other crafts. He compares a lot to doctors and or like physicians, and saying that justice is different. And part of the Socratic method, like I talked about, is the idea that false claims will crumble under the pressure of having to give a defense. And in Plato's Republic, there's a few characters that are pretty strong on their opinions on what justice is, but you could see that their claims don't really hold a lot of ground as Socrates begins to pressure them or ask them, really analyze why they believe what they believe. On him talking about the crafts, he says that every craft seeks the advantage of that which it is responsible for. So that being a doctor seeking, um, his patients to be healthy, or shepherds seeking the good for their sheep, and otherwise they would need no payment. He uses wages kind of as that argument um, that if their actions solely benefited them, then why would they need payment when their payment is that benefit that they're receiving towards themselves. Books 6 and 7 kind of talk more about this idea of absolute goodness, and uses a lot of analogies to say that goodness is kind of our way to look through life to see the what the truth really is. That goodness is our lens that we can seek truth through, as well as a pretty popular analogy about the people in the cave that basically, to summarize, said if people were trapped in a cave since birth and only saw shadows, if everyone escaped, if anyone escaped and discovered reality outside of the cave, the others still in the cave would have a hard time believing that there's more to reality. This is kind of symbolizes uh, philosophy, and saying that um, Socrates' goal was to learn more and take that information and come to others about it to, I guess, kind of enlighten them, but to say that it's hard to shift somebody's perspective of reality if that's all they've ever known, which I think we can kind of relate to as Christians. If somebody didn't necessarily grow up in church, and maybe they've been kind of in the world's view for their whole lives, um, that it's hard to come to them with a completely different way of seeing life, and for them to take you seriously or not to, shut you down right away. And then, like I said, Phaedo kind of touches more on like death and the soul, and how Socrates his kind of contemplation and his last moments, um, comes to the conclusion that the soul is immortal, and that all things come from um, opposites or opposition. So, what was once cold, or what is cold was once warm, what is dry was once wet. This kind of idea saying that, um, so the opposite of death would be immortality, and saying that the soul is what gains that immortality. Um, I had a couple of, I guess, critiques or kind of observations about these works. Is the first would be that justice is kind of continually described as what's advantageous for those that the craft or the role is over. Um, but can you be just and things not always be good for others? Um, I, I I tend to think of situations where you're faced with choices that um, there's never really a great answer to where everybody gains an advantage or everybody benefits, but you still have to do what is just and what is fair. I think that there's often times that we're prevented with um, choices that we have to make that we try to be just, but it's not always fair for everybody. Um, this kind of touches on, can you have good intentions and still be unjust in your actions? Or can you have good intentions and believe you're being just, but your treatment to others is unfair? A couple of the main questions that I was wondering about is, if this idea of good being our lens to see truth, if good makes the unknowable truth knowable, what is where does wrong or bad in um play in this idea, that if good is a lens to see the truth through, then what is bad? Where does that which is bad in life do? Where is the place for wrongs? Is education, another question, is education necessary for understanding of absolute goodness? Socrates seems to think that, a philosophical education is necessary, but as Christians, we believe that we kind of are born with this moral understanding from God. So a question is, can anyone understand true right or wrong, or be enlightened without a philosophical education? And then my last question would be, is it possible to learn good or justice from a bad or unjust person? Thank you.